Welcome to the Seeds of Wisdom series, brought to you by From a Loving Place with author Rachel Wolf. If you like deep, meaningful conversations, this is your place. So settle in and enjoy today's guest. Disclaimer: the Seeds of Wisdom digs into some deep subject matter. In order to plant a seed, we have to dig in the dirt. That's how we grow. If any of the subject matter feels like too much, it is important to seek your own mental health support. I did, and it's why I'm able to be here doing this today. Hello, and welcome to the last episode of this season for Seeds of Wisdom. This is episode 33, and we are ending it with the perfect seed. It's letting go. And I have my special guest here, Alexander Chriest.
Chriest is fine. Chriest.
Close. But I always try to make sure I get it right, even if I say it wrong. So, Alexander Chriest. And I'm so excited to have him on here because I actually met him on another podcast. We were both on the panel, and it was such an amazing conversation. I was like, oh, he has to be on my series. So with that, I'm going to let him introduce himself and we will get started.
All right. Thank you, Rachel. I'm Dr. Alexander Chriest. I am a co-founder of Impact Human Performance, and we specialize really in partnering with big organizations and bringing a lot of well-being and leadership. We focus a lot on stress and recovery, kind of under the resilience wing, and then energy management is a big thing we talk about. But when Rachel and I started talking, we talk about so many different topics on our side of things that it's hard to kind of whittle it down to one. But I mean, my background is kind of scattered. It's perfect for this whole letting go, which is why the idea came up. But I mean, my doctorate's in educational psychology. I focused in motivation, resilience, perseverance. And, over the years, I've kind of found little nuggets or seeds of passion that, I love talking about sleep. I love talking about, anything stress and recovery. But really this concept of letting go is another one that has more recently kind of stuck with me. So excited to have a conversation today.
I'm so excited for this. So let's talk about first, what does letting go mean to you? Because I know that if we don't get that solid first of what the speaker, whoever's presenting it means, it can mean different things. And so I always feel like that clarity is so important for this one.
Yeah. And I think if I really look back, it's probably changed over the years.
Mm-hmm.
Early on, I would probably think of letting go as just this, oh, you're having a hard time, just let go. And, having gone through some difficult times, it's not always easy in the moment to just let go. As I think about it today, it's more about understanding that we have all these stories in our lives, and they are developed from the time we're a young age to now. And they come from, parents, our environment, some things that come from society, ourselves. And these stories really shape where we think we want to go. And there are times that maybe that goes against where we really want to be. And so for me, letting go is just kind of challenging those stories in our lives and just making sure that we're in alignment of where we really want to be heading.
I love that definition of it, because it really is about realigning. Yeah. It helps us realign and to release that story that might not be serving us.
Yes.
And what we want. So can you talk a little bit more about that, about that piece of it, of letting go of the story?
Yeah, the example that always comes to mind, I'll share my own example is, and again, I didn't have parents that were they weren't super hard on me. So it didn't all come from that. I don't know where this all came from, but I had this story that I didn't realize or recognize until I was probably closer to 30. And so my 20s were just trying to chase this, thought or belief of where I thought I was supposed to be at a certain age. And it started with, I was supposed to graduate high school, go to college, graduate when I was 22, get a job, save for retirement, get married, have kids, etc. And, I went to University of Maine. I started and was there for about 2 weeks. I was in their engineering program and I left after 2 weeks. So immediately my story was challenged because I was like, well, there's no way I'm going to graduate when I'm 22 now. And it was always this dissonance between me and the story. And as I went on, I ended up graduating. I went to a couple or a few different schools, changed my major 9 or 10 times. And when I finally finished my undergrad, I was 24. So I just remember, my friends from college that were 2 years younger than me graduating being further ahead than me. They were further along in their journey. And then, you continue, and I didn't know what I really wanted. I felt like I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I was learning from what I didn't want to do. So that took more time. And then, you're bouncing around. I went and got my master's, and then I was almost 30 when I finished that. I didn't have a whole lot of retirement at that point. I wasn't married. I didn't have kids. So I just always felt in my 20s, I was just chasing something or trying to catch up for things that in the big picture for me didn't matter. And it wasn't until, it was probably into my 30s when I really paused and thought, I enjoyed myself in my 20s. I had fun. I had friends that got the job right when they were 22, and they wish they would have kind of done what I did. I went around, I traveled, lived in different places. But from my perspective, I was behind. And so for me, it's just taking the opportunity to really pause, acknowledge kind of what's causing that, maybe stress, because I had stress for ultimately no reason, because it was just something that wasn't like I really didn't care about those things, but for some reason they were ingrained in my head. So it was just understanding that I really, after pausing and kind of acknowledging where I was, you can kind of reframe where it is. Like, understand it really doesn't, the things that I was looking for don't matter. I think just understanding that, things happen at their own timing. And sometimes, in the moment, it can be, you want to rip your hair out. And then you look back and it's kind of intriguing to think, well, I was in Vail selling coats, and what I learned there helped me get to where I am now. And, by changing majors as much as I did, I took, debate class or public speaking class that I didn't think at the time would be anything that I would ever want to do. And here I am. And so it's hard. Because we're just so caught up in it, and it's hard to let go of that, especially if you've had years and years of kind of, enforcing that and reinforcing that. So I think understanding what's most important. I think, like you said, with the alignment, it's something like you can constantly course correct. It doesn't have to be like, I'm here, I want to be here, and there's only one path to get there. Like, there might be some reroutes along the way, and that's okay.
Oh, I fully agree with that. And as you're talking, it just because I have this whole thing about letting go of happily ever after, and it's all about letting go of the fairy tales, letting go of the fairy
Mhm.
tale of this is how things need to look, and it's going to go this way if you do this. and,
Yes.
and and I just and it is so true. Like all the things you're saying, it's like those detours or turns that we didn't think we needed, or they become so important in the big picture of things. And
Yes.
I love looking back and going, I get it. I get why I went there. I get why I did this. It makes sense to me. So, oh, I love that you're talking about this. What did, like, when you finally got it, when you finally got that it was that letting go was about that alignment and becoming aligned, what did that look like for you?
Well, I think first and foremost is understanding that, like, it still kind of sucked along the way. There were moments, it doesn't mean just because we can look back and say, well, oh, that's why I was there, doesn't mean that that was amazing in the moment. I think sometimes just trusting that even the tough times, you can learn from them, and you might not see it in the moment. I think sometimes we just want everything to be revealed all at once, when sometimes it's just like, it's not meant to be revealed all at once. Whatever your beliefs are, the higher power, the universe, whatever it is, kind of works in its own way. And, it's difficult, going through those times. But I think once you, like, we talk about this a lot when we talk about stress and recovery, is, once you have faced and gone through a challenge in your life, a stressor, like, it equips you better for the next time. And I think that's what's helped for me is it's, in my 20s, maybe I was going through blind before I realized, that each one of these things is learning opportunities, or I don't have to go along this path. But then once you kind of understand that, even when you're going through challenging times, you might have a better recognition that this is a learning opportunity or something. This might help you get somewhere further down the road. But I don't know. I think I just look back and said, where did all this come from? Where did all these stories? And you don't have to get specific in the answers, but I think when you start dealing with other people a lot, you can better understand them when you see the big picture as well.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't think I've ever been able to really pinpoint where it came from. I think it's just kind of, I knew my parents always kind of said, go to college, go to college, go to college. That was always there. And then I don't know, I just remember I probably read, it can come from the smallest of things. I probably read something that, most Americans aren't ready for retirement. So then in my mind, I'm like, oh, I better be ready for it. And then like all these little things just kind of come along. And, I'm grateful for the way things have gone, but it's just taking that moment to pause. And we talk about that for pretty much anything we speak about is most times we just live life kind of, especially since I would say, especially since post pandemic or since all of that has happened,
Mhm.
it's kind of like we wake up, we check our phone. Many of us working remotely part time or whatever that looks like. So we check our phone and we just go. And we go until we put our phone down at the end of the night, and we don't give ourselves the opportunity to pause and think.
So
And go ahead.
besides the pause, what are the like what techniques do you use to help you let go when you are misaligned? When you see
Yeah.
that when you've made that awareness that you're misaligned and you're going to use a technique to bring you bring you back.
Yeah. I think it's for me, it's kind of going against what my gut would tell me, but it's the human connection piece. Like
Mhm.
so often when we're kind of not where we want to be, many of us don't want to go and talk to someone else about it. We hold it in, right? We don't want to admit that we're not where we want to be. And I think I'm blessed because I get to, share my stories in front of so many people all the time. I've learned that most people are like this. Almost anyone. I mean, everyone's gone through their own thing, and someone can look very buttoned up on the outside, but it doesn't mean they didn't go through the challenges they get there. You see this with leaders when they get into a new position; they just look like the most confident leader and maybe they're scared inside, or they just think they have this imposter syndrome, so to speak. And the more you can just share with others and connect with others, I really believe that's what's helped me is just understanding that almost anyone I've talked to, no matter what walk of life they come from, they've gone through these things, and there's different ways to get there. I mean, there could be a group of people, and we're all trying to go to the same place, and we all take completely different routes. So success isn't necessarily the end game, but how you get there and how you just take that moment to pause, enjoy what you're going through, and share it with others.
Well, and I think that's such a great point because, for so many people, we can get trapped in our own thought cycles, our own stories. And when we talk to other people who are on the same kind of path, we can see that it's just a different way of looking at it. And we could look at it that way too, or we can choose a whole different way to look at it. There's so many different ways to look at it. The way we're choosing to look at it in this moment is just one choice.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about your answer because it really can help us snap out of it when we see it's just a perspective.
Yes.
and,
Yes.
and when we listen to other people, I feel like if we truly listen and are open to hear them, we can see the options instead of,
Yes.
even if it's different, even if it's something that we don't believe, but just even seeing that there's an option can help
Yeah.
snap us in the right direction to really let go. Uh,
Yeah. And those
Yeah.
different views and lenses can, I mean, I think of it too. When I was working on my doctorate, I mean, again, I didn't think I was where I wanted to be. I was around 35, and, people from the outside are like, oh, wow, this is great. You're doing this, 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 and this. And for me, it was, well, I'm still in school. Like, I didn't think I'd still be in school. And, it was like, it's easy to just get caught up in it. And I think unfortunately we're just harder on ourselves than we are on anyone else. And it's easy for, and you see it all the time. Like I myself included, though, go and someone's going through a tough time, and you give them grace, you tell them to, you know, enjoy the small things, just take a step back, but we don't do it for ourselves. It's much easier to give advice to others than us take it ourselves. I think that's, I mean, I'm sure you see this all the time that, in doing what we do, people will come to us for help and assume that we do everything right all the time. And it's not the case at all. I mean, we face the same challenges, and just because I love to, exercise, stay active, get sleep, doesn't mean I do it as
Yeah.
much as I'd like, or as, the way I'd like all the time.
Yeah, I mean, because part of what we do is we're practicing the storytelling for ourselves so that we can use it more too.
Yeah.
It's embedding it into us that, oh, when we're going through this, I can use this tool. I
Yeah.
have it in me, and yeah, because I've gone through that too with the pandemic. My book came out right before the pandemic, but it has tons of tools for the pandemic. So I just was like, okay, I need to read my own book
Exactly.
and actually start practicing. And that's actually where I got one of my mindfulness practices is to wash my hands and just to be really fully present with the process of washing my hands. And that actually strengthened so much during the pandemic because I was like, this is one I can use.
Yeah. It's funny you say it, because that's something I've been using forever for just a recovery technique, is just
Yeah.
washing your hands, and just how cleansing, not just germ wise, but
Yeah.
just like mind, body as well. And the pandemic kind of, it really helped, because this is a pause. Like
Yeah.
it's an intentional pause. It's something that you do hopefully multiple times a day, that if you bring intentionality to it, it can be a great tool to just pause
Yes.
and
Yeah.
reset.
And honestly, a piece of letting go is if we don't pause, we're not going to have that self-awareness to let it go.
Yeah. You don't know what you need to let go either. I think that's sometimes it.
Because you're holding on to everything so tight until you pause.
Yeah.
It's like, because you can't even question your own thinking when you're so attached in your mind to that kind of stuff of
Yeah.
the way it should look. Oh, the shoulds.
Oh yeah. But we do that for ourselves more. I should do this. I should work out. I should. And I mean, we taught a program last week. We were in the Pentagon, and we were just like, one thing we've done in one of our main programs. It's a 2.5 day program, but like we used to just talk about change all the time, and we just shifted from change to growth. Meaning really the same thing. But what we found was individuals have completely different like definitions of what that is, and people will just like gravitate toward growth. And ultimately, I mean, what we've kind of found is like change is oftentimes put on us. It's almost viewed negative. Oh, you need to change. You need to make a change, an adjustment. And growth is the other way around. It's something we hopefully inherently want to do. So just by shifting those small things, is from a word, from change to growth, really at the 30,000 foot level, we mean the same thing by them, but it has a completely different, context.
Oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. So my mind's reeling right now. It's like just something because for me, change is a good thing. So in my mind, in the way I view change, I see it as this beautiful thing. It's possible for everybody. We're always changing, but I I I know a lot of people are attached to those old messages that nobody you can't really change. Nobody can the tiger can't change his stripes. All those
Yeah.
sayings that say change isn't possible. But really the growth we all are always growing and it's a natural thing. So I see that as what you were saying is like it feels more natural for people to accept growth. I could totally get where that makes sense. And even with my one of the analogies I use is the garden of the soul. And
Mhm.
it's a garden, it's growth. And it's the whole concept of it is about growth. So it's like, that makes sense.
Yeah. And it's just the power of the word. Like you said, there could be a number of listeners that, like you said, view change as positive. And it's like, then keep thinking that. Like, that's not, we're not here to say one's right, one's wrong, but just highlighting the fact that a word can be interpreted so many different ways. So think of the same way a story can. It's like, if you ask 100 people what's success look like, you may get 100 different answers.
Yeah, which is why I asked you that first question, because letting go is one of those things. It can mean so much and have, for some people, it has a negative connotation because of whatever their story is. And
Yeah.
and I know how powerful the concept of letting go is. So it's like I really wanted to make sure that people were seeing your interpretation of letting
Yeah.
go right from the bat, because for that very reason. I knew I would absolutely love this conversation. So is there anything that you would like to say before we wrap it up for our Facebook and Spotify listeners or podcast platforms?
Yes. I would just say, we all have these stories. We have this, maybe this plan that's been created, whether we realize it or not, and where we want to be, where we want to go. And like, it's never too late to adapt it, adjust it. Or, I think of it, man, I was 17 years old when this started to really formalize. And at the time I was, 29, letting what my 17-year-old self put together, like, beat me up. And it's just like, it makes sense. Like, we're a different person then. I mean, I was a completely different person in those, 12 years. So just allow yourself some grace to adjust. It's so hard. And I think it's also, I mean, I think part of the story is just, you look at other people, and I had friends in high school that they wanted to be doctors, they became doctors. They wanted to become a lawyer, they became a lawyer. And I was never that person that had exactly what I wanted to do. So my path wouldn't be the same as theirs, but I was building my plan based on someone else's kind of route, so to speak.
Oh, and we can do this all the time in every area of our lives. We could do it financially, romantically, all of that. We're following somebody else's plan and then wondering why we're resentful and angry that it's not working, because it's not ours. It's not meant to be the way it looks for somebody else. We have to figure
Yeah.
out ours. So, so
Yes.
many good points. So, if you are listening anywhere else but on YouTube, you can go there now. The links will be in the on the platform, on the podcast platform. It's in the description, and if it's on Facebook, it's in the comment section. So come over to YouTube, because I know we're going to get even deeper into this topic, which is such an important topic to choose your path. So come over there, please. All right. So let's talk about that, because I really do think that is where so many people get hung up, is attaching to other people's stories of what their lives should look like. And so even though it's a different trajectory, we're judging against them, and how that holds us back.
Yeah, and we're also judging on, like you said earlier, looking through one lens.
Mm-hmm.
We can't see the entire picture of anyone else's lives. So it's hard to say, wow, this everything looks perfect on, through the lens I'm looking at. But at the end of the day, I think it'd be daunting too to think like we have to create this whole path for ourselves, but it evolves. And I think that's it, is it's just kind of, every day you just kind of work toward what it is that matters most to you. And it's why the importance of, kind of understanding what, whatever we want to call it, your meaning, your purpose, your why would be, helps guide that. Because if I'm working toward that, the other things start to fall in place. And I can remember, like, in my mid 20s when I started going through a lot of these, purpose focused, seminars and this, and it was hard because it's kind of like you're trying to build things and you don't know all the answers yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, sometimes it was just listening to other people, and not necessarily, the opposite of what I just said. I'm not latching onto their story, but learning bits and pieces for everything. It's like when you read books on anything that we're talking about, you can read 10 books from 10 authors on the same topic and everything's different. I'm not taking the whole book. I'm taking a bit from here, a bit from here, a bit from here. And I think that's where I think I had the most success, is just asking questions and asking people, because I think that's why I really went back to that human connection pieces because so many people go through this. Like even the people that might look like they have this path completely buttoned up and it was perfect from the beginning, it's not necessarily the case. Like we only see one small piece of it.
And my mom used to always say to me, don't judge someone's outsides by your insides.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I mean, it's so true in this too because it's. I mean,
Mhm.
unfortunately, however you want to look at it, but with social media, it's the same thing. Like we see one piece of it, and I mean, I can make my life look a number of different ways just on what I post. And I think it's just one of those things that many times we use social media as a recovery break, and what do? We kind of scroll through, and that might be good for some, but we really try to challenge and try to find forms of recovery that are outside of that, just because inherently you're just going to likely pull from that or just make judgments just from your recovery break. And so is it really truly recovery, or is it us doing things maybe that aren't helping our overall recovery?
Yeah. And for a lot of people, it's actually hurting it
Yeah.
because I've seen a lot of people have to take social media breaks because they're judging other people against themselves. And so it's like there's a resentment.
Yeah.
That's definitely not recovery.
Yeah.
So
And we
that
see, I mean,
does not
I think
help.
it's one of those things. It's just letting go of. I mean, we've stopped even within our. Like we work more on the like a corporate side. Like we don't even have job title. We when we introduce ourselves as a collective group, we don't have participants share their job title because that becomes such a story. You define yourself by a job, which is I think it can help you achieve certain things. But if I define myself by a job and I lose that job, that's going to be a lot harder to let go than if you were kind of have something that's aligned that can be applied to any job. I think of it. I was working in a hospital system in Florida, and it was when I first started facilitating. I was an exercise physiologist, then was a wellness kind of ambassador. And I wanted to get this job. There was a what was it called? It was an education manager that oversaw all education programs within the hospital in terms of wellness. And I worked my butt off to try to get there. And it was, months and months and months. And when I finally got the job, I was so excited that I got this education manager job. I wanted new business cards. I wanted a new thing for my desk. And within the first week, I had to go through leadership training as part of the job. And the first day of leadership training, all they talked about was how you want to be a leader and not a manager. And I was like, well, crap. Like I've worked all this time to be this education manager, and now that's not good enough. And it was like this. It was a tough moment for me because I thought that's what I wanted, and I mean, it's a word more than anything
Mhm.
else. But I let that really define me, so it got to be very difficult moving on from that. Because here, I mean, I thought I was where I wanted to be, and then something else came up, and just the way I viewed it, or someone else viewed it, and I think if we put too much weight into things like job titles, we run the risk of letting that kind of be our, you know, creep into being
Identity.
our identity. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, I'm connecting to this so deeply because I know like when so many people have lost their jobs and if they have these roles that they tie themselves to with those jobs and with that they feel like they totally lose themselves when they lose it. And it's like, but you're so much more than that job. You're so
Yeah.
much more, but they can't see it because they have put their box around the job and that's the only vision they have is within the box.
Yeah.
And so it's brutal for them to let go because and there is grief in the letting go process, and that's something that's important to know too is we experience grief like any loss for that, and that's a piece of letting go.
Yeah. And it's hard. I mean, and I think that's a theme we see more than anything else is, in some of our content where we have people develop their purpose, it's, well, can I have one for work and at home? And I mean, in my younger days, it'd be easy to be like, yes. But as you learn and understand by having two, I think that's more and more work. Then you start making decisions at work that might be against your home purpose. So how can you have something that aligns with both? And and it's not an easy thing to do, but once you start crafting that, uh, it can help in those tough moments. And then, my purpose has always been kind of along the lines of, to inspire the people in my life through my words, actions, and behaviors.
Mhm.
And so regardless of the job I have, I can do that. If I'm at home, I can do that. And it just, for me, I've fortunately, after that education manager debacle, as I'll call it, I stopped chasing job titles because it didn't matter for me. It wasn't important to me in that moment.
I love those kind of learning experiences that shape our lives that we never even knew that something like that would be lined up to shape, how we view the world or how we view our careers, our career paths is to let go of that piece. It opens up so many doors to not chase,
Yeah.
pigeonhole ourselves into a title.
Yeah. And again, it's a reminder that it doesn't mean that when I was going through that training that it was awesome. It was frustrating. It was not my favorite couple of days, but I truly believe that, if you work hard and you know, have some form of purpose or something to strive for, that good things happen. It's a matter of, it doesn't always happen when you want it. It would have been nice if some of the things where I am now would have happened before, but there's struggles that happen and they help you get to where you are. And I think it's just that power of pause to just continually pause and just assess where we are. Are we where we want to be? What's our biggest, challenge, stressor? And that's a big one too. Like we talk about stress all the time. And, some of the biggest stressors we have in our lives aren't the things that cause us to kind of overflow. So I always use the analogy, it's like a big kettle on a stove, and we just put all of our stressors in, whether it be work, home, finances, the world around us, connections, family, friends, anything. And sometimes the thing that causes that pot to boil over might be, the kids running to the door, excited to see you after a long day of work, and you snap because you're just not there. So it's sometimes not the biggest stressor. So I always just, when we talk about this plan thing, I mean, I think of my 20s and how much energy I put into this story I was telling myself. I had to be here and here and here and here. And if I could have let that go earlier, it would have allowed a lot more room in that pot for other things. So maybe I would have responded to stress more effectively because I didn't have this giant kind of burden hanging over my head based on, a story I created when I was 17.
Well, and what I'm hearing when you're talking is like just how that process of letting go, it's showing, it literally helps us see our misalignment,
Yeah.
and it helps us see if we can have the experience and go through the challenges of it and not expect it to be hunky dory.
Yeah.
Our challenges are not all going to look like pretty pictures.
Yes.
but but then to just see that, okay, this experience showed me where I'm misaligned, and there's a piece in that because that's something you can take with you everywhere you go. I mean, I think of that manager job for you. You're taking that with you this much further
Yeah.
into what you do now because you had that experience. If you didn't, you might not have that piece that gets to that many more people.
Exactly. And I I don't know, it just came to me, but I don't know if you do anything with this with the way you teach to let it go, but sometimes you need like this symbolic, I've been saying pause, I've been saying, but I've gone through some things where like you've just listed out all the things that I remember listing out my path, like what was the biggest, what was on, and I like physically ripped up that piece of paper, the one that had all the, you're supposed to be at 22, this and this, and it just helped me like, I don't know, visualize that so I could move on and let go. And sometimes it takes that symbolic gesture to take that first step.
Oh yeah, I'm a big burner.
Yeah.
Write it, burn it, write it, burn it.
Yes.
Because and to me, it's like going up in smoke, is that letting it go. Okay, I'm giving this over because it's not serving me anymore. And
Yeah.
having that physical action that helps. I've been taught from a very young age to get it out of your body.
Yeah.
So whatever it is, I never held in I'm not a person that holds in my feelings. I have no problem expressing feelings, But I think one of the blessings of that is I don't have a lot of illness because I things don't get stuck in my body
Yeah.
because I allow it to move out of me, and whether it's writing it out and burning it, or if it's however it is, I try to avoid it coming out toxically towards another person and projecting it
Yeah.
onto someone else who doesn't deserve it. But it just really does help me not carry it anymore. And it's a big part of the letting go process, because it's like feelings aren't meant to stay with you, they're
Yeah.
meant to pass through you. And that's been a piece of mine that I've always kind of aligned with, that to help them pass, I do something. And so the lists, the letters, all that stuff has been part of my method to let that stuff go, because to me it's toxic when it stays in you. So I don't want it there.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I always think of emotions as like warning signs, and we need to learn to listen to them. Like they're not like, I don't think of emotions as inherently good or bad, but when we stay with them for too long, that's where we start seeing some of this, you know, you, I mean, extreme could be disease or sickness or whatever that may look like. So how can you use them as warning signs? And I think sometimes for me, us, the other thing we talk about a lot is just changing environment, movement. You
Yes,
start feeling
movement.
these things, just get outside, and it's amazing what that can do.
It really is. I have always been shocked with the movement thing. When my daughter was having issues as a young child, what they had her do is jump on a trampoline and then fall onto a like a plush chair.
We
And
need
that
we need
release
trampolines. I
released
like
it.
that.
Yeah, it released it from the body. And I was amazed at all that pent up energy and what that did for her to release it just in that way. And I'm like, oh, I like this. You
Yeah,
just don't
it's
even think about it.
yeah, it's sometimes hard when you see. I mean, we talk about this when we talk about sleep a lot. Like parents know how to get their kids to sleep. They have a routine, this and that, but then they don't do anything for themselves. And to think like so many things, like even emotions. Like if a kid's having an emotional outburst, what do? Maybe like, have them change scenery, get out of the room. But then we don't do it for ourselves. So it's really, I think sometimes we just search for these complicated answers, and we don't accept that if it's a simple answer, I would have figured that out. And we almost will dwell on things or not let go of things because we don't want it. We almost, without realizing it, maybe subconsciously think, well, I don't want to do this either because that means I could have been doing this earlier. But sometimes it's just hard to see. Like just because it's simple or easy to do doesn't mean it's always simple or easy to do in the moment.
Yes. Oh, yes. Well, and that's why, I've been talking about to people about making sure like you have your list of tools of what to do when you're stressed out, have them around you so when you are stressed out, you're not thinking about them.
Yes. Well, that's, I mean, and go ahead.
It's so hard when you're in it to be like, how can I get myself out of it?
Yeah. And we talk a lot about shorter recovery break, like a minute long. And it's the
Yeah.
same thing. If you don't know what you're going to do in that minute, the minute's going to pass before you have a chance. So it's always like, I have my five that's, it's really get outside, accomplish something, exercise, listen to music, talk to somebody. Like I know those are my five. So it's something in the moment. I don't have to think about it. It's something just trained in my head now that you just have to go do it. Because unfortunately, like when you go through stressful moments or challenges in your life, talking to people, I think, is one of the best things you can do. And how often have we just, someone's calling us and we just hit the right button, we ignore it. We put like it's almost, why don't you just stew in this a little longer? And I mean, sometimes these, if you pick up the phone, it can make the world of difference.
Oh yeah. I cherish all my I have like set times with people because those connections, and there are people who are aligned with my vision of stuff where they can see things differently, but it's coming from a heart-centered place, it's coming from a loving place. So I know it's not going to be a misaligning conversation.
Yeah, you have to have the right people because there's certain people in your life that they're great people, but maybe in some circumstances they're not the person you want to be talking to.
Yes. Yeah, that's one of the lessons I learned. Don't go to the hardware store for bread. I learned that a long time
Yeah.
ago, and I take it to heart because hardware stores are great for those things that a hardware store carries. But
Yeah.
to expect somebody to have traits that they don't naturally have, to expect people to be who they're not, it's not fair to them and it's not going to serve us.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. It just doesn't and you go to the wrong people and it's actually going to be harder to let go
Yeah.
because you don't want
Absolutely.
a person who's going to stew in it with you.
Yeah.
Oh, let's go get them. It doesn't help anything.
Well, I always said like venting is so good, but like if you continue
Mhm.
to vent over and over and then you're just spinning in a circle, like that's where it's good to get out, but then you have to know when to move.
Yeah.
And, again, simple in theory, not always
Yeah.
simple in execution.
I used to have this one friend that said, okay, I'm giving you 15 minutes to have your pity party and then we're going to move on from it.
I love it.
I
I love
was
it. And
like,
that's a,
but it's that then it doesn't need to be longer than that before I could move into my tools. And that I loved that about her. And that's who I would go to when I was ready to move. Like
yeah.
just have the last push of it and then go.
Yeah. That time, I love that timed idea where it's you know,
A window.
it's, yes, with a
Yep.
firm ending.
Yes. Yeah. And I always had such respect for her in that because if I say I'm solution bound, but I'm staying in the problem, it's not going to serve me,
Yeah, absolutely.
and that's what our friendship was about is the solution. So that was her specialty. So yeah, that's all I got.
Yeah.
And that was good enough. It was perfect.
And it worked for you. And I think that's the
Mhm.
biggest thing is you just have to try things. And
Yes.
so often we either have this story that says that won't work for me, so we never try it. And I did that with meditation for the first into my 20s until I was probably 30. I was like, I can't do this. I can't do this. And then I finally tried it. And I was like, huh, like I can't just sit there and meditate. I need like a guided meditation, but that works for me. But I just pushed it under the rug, swept under the rug for years. Had I just tried it, it could have had a whole different
Well, and
outcome.
to have those not as firm of boundaries with meditation too, because if you go to certain people and they're like, you have to do it this way, this way, this way, this way, or it won't. No, it's not. It's not
Exactly.
how it works. And it is about finding your right way of meditating. I mean, I have a lot of people who use woods as meditation and do woods walks, and it's about that mindfulness and getting centered and balanced and breathing and focusing in on it, and that has the same effects as sitting down for other people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, that's such an important piece. Is there anything else that you would like to share that you feel like could really help people who struggle to let go?
Yeah, and I'm just thinking through personal experiences, and I think sometimes with letting go, and I probably could have said this from the beginning, it doesn't mean you have to forget everything either. You can let go and still have the memories. You can still have, you know, the things that you did go through. But because I think sometimes people don't let go because they think it's just going to be, I'm going to forget everything that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And, there might be things you want to forget. There might be things that are good to, but at the same time, it doesn't mean it's like a complete connect. But I think it's kind of like it's just, I'm letting go of like keeping that in, for my analogy earlier, like keeping in that pot, or
Yeah.
I'm letting someone live in my head rent free. It's just like, and it's the same thing when you shift in like letting go, forgiveness kind of go hand in hand. Forgiveness is for you. And I think so often people think, well, I'm not going to forgive this person because I don't want to give them that. I don't want to give that to them. And it's like, it's not for them, it's for you. And I think that was one thing that when I was going through all this stuff that helped me because it was a personal thing. It wasn't about everyone else, it was about me. And when you started letting go of those things, by forgiving, it was amazing what it did for everything else.
Yeah, because this is the thing about what people sometimes don't understand is that when we don't forgive, we're holding that resentment inside of us. We're carrying that poison inside of us that's affecting and projecting out to everything we do. And
Yeah.
so that's going to get reflected back to us over and over and over until we make that decision to let it go.
Yeah, and I see. I mean, it's when I think of when you get cut off in traffic, right? Like it's like I'm the one that's 10 minutes later. If I'm still stewing up, that person doesn't even know they cut you off, and they're just going on with their day. And here I am, like I walk into work and I'm tense, and
Mhm.
maybe I'm less like my connections with my colleagues are not as good, or my family, and it's a simple example, like you know, we've all been through that where we're holding on to that. And I think that's what it is. I mean, just imagine driving down the road for 5 minutes with that, 10 minutes, 20, 30, where it's just, and going back to storytelling content, we have very different stories. And I shared this last week. It's, you know, if someone cuts me off, the story I'm telling is that person's a jerk. They woke up today to ruin my day, and they're doing this just in spite of me. If I accidentally cut someone off, it's oops, I didn't see you. I'm sorry. Same event, but just the stories we tell are completely different. And we do that all the time, and it's one of those things that, when we start to recognize that, like these small little moments, it's like, man, if I could just be a little calmer when things happen, someone cuts me off or someone doesn't pick up after their dog in my front yard. That's a personal one for me that's hard to let go at times. And it's just, we let these stories just build, and, it's going to impact how we spend time with the people and things that matter most in our lives. And I think that's like when I start to really try to shift is, it's one thing if it's impacting me internally, but I mean, then it starts carrying over to other people. And that's when I need to have that hard stop.
Oh yeah. Well, and I love that you brought up traffic because the guest that I had before you also brought that up and was talking about something with Deepak Chopra where it's like it's the ultimate resistance of what it is when we get
Yeah.
all discombobulated in traffic because it if we truly believe that things are happening the way they're supposed to, yet we resist traffic.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I have to work on that one. I live in a tourist town in Florida. So, you know, it gives me opportunity to grow this muscle because it's something that I think a lot of people don't get to though too, is these things take practice. Sometimes we're going to recognize them 10 minutes after we've already made a whole story in our heads. Other times it's going to be 5 minutes, then right during it, and then maybe we'll catch ourselves right before it, but still do it anyway.
Yeah. And those are all wins. I think that's a
Yes.
big, like, even if you catch it 10 minutes later, it's still catching it 10 minutes later. And we, on the traffic, I mean, everyone has traffic. I mean, it's
Mhm.
wherever I teach in the world, there's someone that has traffic. But we had someone, they worked with the government, and they had like, we were teaching a stress class, and they'd come up at the end of the class and said, this is interesting because in the last several years, he had been shot, he had been involved in a suicide bombing. And he's like, the thing that's going to kill me is how I respond to traffic. Because, and those are things that he was so well trained in where he worked for the first two things, but never trained traffic. At the end of the day, I mean, if you commute to work, or even if you don't, you're going to be in traffic every day to
Yeah.
some extent. So it's something you're not going to avoid. So when you have those stressors that are always there, those are the most important ones that to train yourself to better kind of manage, have
Yeah.
plans in place. Like, what do? You can listen to podcasts. You can use this I always use, my commute is time to talk to family. And it's all relative because during the pandemic, some of the things that people missed the most was their commute. And these are the same people that a year ago, 2 years ago, were saying, I hate traffic, I hate my commute. But they realized it was that separation for them between work and home. And it's how they viewed it. But I mean, it's just, if you can think about the things that are going to be impacting you on a daily basis, those are the things I work on first. And that was like the story for me that I had to let go on, the map of my life that I had planned out from a young age. Like when I let go of that, it was great. It doesn't mean that those things weren't important to me. It doesn't mean I don't want to save for retirement, start a family, get married, all these things. But they can happen in different orders. They can come at
Yeah.
different times, and it's okay.
Yeah. I think and you make such a good point in this is I feel like it's the attachment to these things. It's the
Yeah.
attachment where we end up putting shame on ourselves when we don't accomplish, when we're not where we want to be, when we start self-abusing because of these beautiful things we can want, but our attachment to them becomes toxic.
Yeah.
So it's amazing how, and it's all in the storytelling.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I mean, it's story, everything we talk about. I mean, that's it. Like that, I think everything kind of runs through story because we have the ability to shift. I mean, you can have two very different stories about the same thing and, have two very different outcomes. And our lives are just really a collection of the stories we tell.
Yeah.
And, it's amazing how, I mean, and there's no perfect story, but it's just, sometimes you'll see people that, might be more negative in their storytelling. Something good happens to them and it's all luck. The story they tell is, well, I got lucky. I got this job because I was lucky, or I found this person because I was lucky. And when you start realizing it's not that, like, it's, I worked for this. I
Mhm.
deserve this. Like, that's the same outcome, but just a different thing that's running through our head.
And it makes the experience night and day different.
Absolutely.
This two same, it can be the two same outcomes. It's where, when people talk about money can't buy happiness, the most miserable person with the most money can live in complete lack and separation and just misery in their lives. And then the same thing can happen, and it could be someone who lives with love, abundance, and peace in their minds, and they're going to have a totally different experience of it. And it doesn't matter if they're rich or poor to do that.
Yeah.
That's not the piece that matters.
Yeah.
It's the energy that we put into what we have that matters.
Yeah. I love that. And it's, I mean, I think I think especially with finances, it's kind of like, I feel like people just think it's this end goal. Like, once I make this, I'll be here. And then again, it's a rolling deadline. Then you get more and then you get more. And then, and I think it's the same with happiness. Like, happiness, sometimes I think people just say, like, oh, I can't wait just to be happy.
Yeah.
Like, happiness isn't just like this end game. To me, it's kind of like, we have this concept called mastering moments, where it's, kind of winning the small moments in your day. And, the goal isn't to be perfect. The goal is to have more wins and losses. And I think that's kind of how I think of happiness. It's like, happiness isn't just thinking and seeing everything is happy. And there's research around this, like people that just saw that everything is happy, positive interaction with everything, weren't as happy as some of the people that had, like, I think it was like a 6 happy to 1 kind of
Yeah. Because then that's
bad
the
negative.
toxic positivity. If you go into that realm, where is you're
Exactly.
actually covering feelings and suppressing them, so it's toxic positivity because you're not actually letting what needs to come out of you come out.
Yeah.
So
And I think that's it. I mean, it's hard. I mean, it's having been someone that's gone through some very difficult times in my life. It's where you don't see the end in sight. You think, how's this ever going to get better? It's never, like, people just say, oh, just smile, you'll be better. And I like, that's like the blessing. Like, it's terrible advice in the moment, but great advice when you're out of it. And you're like, huh, it actually did help, right? But I think that's some of the advice you kind of have to find yourself.
mm-hmm.
Uh, but I mean, I think that's it. It's just like, how can I win the day? Like, what's that look like? Like, how can I get more wins and losses, so to
Well,
speak?
and I love that you specify that. You said how, what, it's like, what would it look like to win the day? What would it look like? And that's all. Like, just even having that self-awareness and observation can help shift that energy. Just
Yeah.
the observation, and that's the shift that so many of us, because it's like, for me, one of the things I said, what if I'm operating out of fear, I'll go, what would it look like if I'm operating out of love in this moment?
Yeah.
And just that self-awareness takes the level down.
Hmm. And that's all it takes. Like, it's not,
Mhm.
it doesn't have to be rocket science. It can be
No.
these small moments that can make a significant impact on the day.
Yeah.
And sometimes breaking it down to the day can be, I mean, I think of it both ways. Like, we talk about, like, there's going to be you go through some tough times where maybe day to day, it's not as great, but you step back and it's like, oh, but in the big picture, it's not that big a deal. And then there's
Mhm.
sometimes you do need to get microscopic and say, what's one small thing? That's something we've really, like, I think so many of us, I'm pointing as if there's a light switch back there, but so many of us think of our life as like it's on or off. We think
Yeah,
of this as
black and white.
I either exercise, I'm great, or I don't do anything at all. I eat well, I sleep well, or not at all. And we just kind of, how can you make it a dial? Like, what's a 10 look like? What's a one look like? What's a zero look like? And what's a five look like? And like, how can you start just piecing together these small wins? And, like when I'm eating, like if I'm out with my friends, I'm having a burger, a beer, and fries. Sometimes my win is leaving 3 fries on the plate, and that's it. And
Yeah.
that's a win for that day, as opposed to being so, on or off. And I think that's with the same thing talking about letting go is it's also, like we said, we're either hanging on to it or we're letting go and forgetting everything. It's not like that. Like letting go is somewhere in the middle where we're choosing, we're putting ourselves in control, we're choosing to move forward, and taking the things from whatever it is we're trying to let go and take the wins. Like, what are the things I learned? What are the things I enjoyed? But what are the things I need to kind of move on from?
Yeah. Oh, so much good stuff. I I trust that anybody listening to this, if you are here, you are meant to be here. You're meant to hear what was in this podcast today, because really there's so many good nuggets in here that if you just take some little notes on it and just try implementing those. I love that concept of those picking out those 5 things, because that's something that I hadn't thought about. But it's like, if you can bed those 5 things, then just to go there. And I
Yeah.
just love that. But there's so many more nuggets of awesomeness in this. I just know that if you just apply something, it definitely is going to help, because it is in that gray. It's not the black, it's not the white, it's the gray. And that's what helps us release from just sticking into it having to be one way or having it to be the other. Combine them.
Yeah. Love
Enjoy
it.
them all. So thank you so much for being here with us today. It's been a blessing and an honor to have you on the show.
Well, thank you. It's been a lot of fun. So thank you, Rachel. Hope we can cross paths again.
Yes, definitely. Make sure to follow the links that accompany this episode. You will learn a lot more about today's guest and see what they have going on now. You will also get all the links to follow them on their journeys if this seed resonates with you. Come back September 2023 for new episodes of Seeds of Wisdom. If you loved what you saw or listened to, don't forget to subscribe to the channel.